All right, ready to dive into another fascinating life.
Always.
This one, well, let's just say it's a doozy. Picture this. It's 1968, and more people are glued to their TV sets to watch a ukulele playing oddball get married than witness the moon landing just a year later.
You're kidding.
Nope.
Well,
That's Tiny Tim. That's the kind of impact he had.
it's remarkable, really. He kind of captured that era, like all that social change, the fascination with, well, the unconventional.
Exactly. That's what we're diving into Tiny Tim today. How this seemingly bizarre figure became such a phenomenon.
Mhm.
And, what his story can tell us about fame, identity, and all those shifting tides of pop culture, right?
I think what's often overlooked with Tiny Tim, born Herbert Cowrie, is that he wasn't just some manufactured novelty act. He was a man with a deep passion for music, especially those sounds of, well, a bygone era.
So true. It's easy to focus on the outlandish persona,
Oh,
but he was a serious, student of music. I mean, the sources mention him collecting 78s and sheet music, obsessively as a kid, to the point of being perpetually broke.
really?
Yeah, what kids spends all their allowance on vintage records? That's some serious dedication.
You're not wrong. So imagine young Herbert growing up in Washington Heights, New York, surrounded by, well, relics of the past. He was drawn to the crooners of the 20s and 30s, like Rudy Valley and Bing Crosby. Their voices must have, transported him.
Yeah, to another time. It wasn't just listening, though. He was studying those records, dissecting the vocal techniques, the phrasing, the emotions. You can hear those influences in his performances. Even when he's singing in that high falsetto, that kind of became his trademark.
His parents, Tilly and Buttrose, apparently they weren't thrilled with his, what they called sissy singing.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of fascinating, right? How his family dynamics might have shaped him, almost like a rebellion.
Yeah.
Especially since, well, his parents were described as the original hippies, embracing that bohemian lifestyle. You'd think they'd be more open to his style.
It's interesting, isn't it? It reminds us that even the most unconventional families, well, they have their own norms and expectations, right?
Absolutely. So here's this young man, deeply passionate about a genre of music that most people his age probably thought was old-fashioned. He's facing resistance, even within his family. And yet, he persists. He starts performing, taking any gig he can get. The sources describe him playing at company parties, street corners, amateur singing nights. He even spent some time in a flea circus.
A flea circus.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Like the perfect image, a mix of the bizarre and the endearing.
Yeah.
That struggle for recognition in unconventional spaces.
Right. And it's during this period of hustling, honing his craft,
Hmm.
that he discovers his falsetto voice. It's almost like an accidental discovery. He's trying to harmonize with both the male and female parts in a duet. And suddenly, this incredible high-pitched voice emerges.
Wow, just like that.
Pretty much.
He ran to his parents, all excited, right, to share his newfound ability,
And they were.
met with more disapproval.
Oof. Talk about disheartening.
It makes you wonder how he maintained that childlike enthusiasm, that unwavering belief, despite the rejection.
Yeah, his resilience is incredible.
Absolutely.
Then there's this pivotal moment. He lands a gig at a lesbian-owned bar called Page 3.
Page 3.
Now that's an interesting turn of events.
So Page 3 became his haven, where his unique style was not only accepted, but celebrated.
Think about it. Tiny Tim, this seemingly oddball character, right? Belting out show tunes and romantic ballads in his signature falsetto in a lesbian bar in the 1960s.
Wow.
It's a collision of subcultures, a testament to the power of music.
Bridging divides.
And it's here at Page 3 that we start to see the emergence of the Tiny Tim persona. That would soon captivate the nation.
Right.
But it wasn't all sunshine and tulips, He was grappling with his own internal conflicts, especially when he came to his religious beliefs and his complicated relationship with women.
Yeah, there's that constant tension in the sources between his public persona and his private struggles. He documented all this in his journals, his anxieties, his desires. It offers us a glimpse into the mind of a man trying to reconcile his faith with his desires, his unconventional lifestyle, with, well, his yearning for love and acceptance.
So we have this complex character, talented performer, devoted student of music, a man wrestling with his own contradictions, all building towards something extraordinary. And in 1968, the world finally takes notice.
It's like a meteor hit the cultural landscape. His appearance on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, changed everything.
I remember seeing clips of that episode. Even Johnny Carson, a man known for his composure, his quick wit, seemed taken aback by Tiny Tim.
I bet. Carson was visibly confused. The audience was captivated and bewildered, but there was this undeniable charm to Tiny Tim's awkwardness, his childlike innocence, his genuine passion.
Then he launches into Tiptoe Through the Tulips, and the song, instant sensation. It solidified his place in pop culture history.
Wow, a song about flowers, sung in falsetto by a man in his mid-30s, became a defining anthem of the late 60s.
It's wild. And as we delve deeper into Tiny Tim's story, we'll see how that one song, that one appearance on The Tonight Show, catapulted him to a level of fame and scrutiny that few could have imagined.
Buckle up. It really was like watching a cultural earthquake, in real time. Tiny Tim on The Tonight Show. Suddenly he's everywhere. This unlikely star captivating everyone with his ukulele and that falsetto.
I know, right? It's crazy. Just a few years earlier, he's playing in flea circuses, struggling to get by, and now he's like rubbing shoulders with celebrities on every variety show, even releasing a hit album.
Talk about overnight success. But,
Yeah.
it's never that simple. Behind the scenes, Tiny Tim's navigating this newfound fame, a whirlwind romance, and this deep internal conflict that's starting to come out.
And that leads us to possibly the most iconic moment of his career, his wedding to Miss Vicky on The Tonight Show.
Wow.
Over 50 million people tuned in. Can you believe that?
Yeah, that's incredible. It really shows you the fascination with Tiny Tim. He was this enigma, and people, they wanted to know more.
And they definitely got more. Who gets married on live television? Especially to someone like Miss Vicky, who was, 17 years old at the time? More than 2 decades younger than Tiny Tim?
That age difference, that was definitely a point of contention, and something Tiny Tim himself struggled with. We see it in his journals. He acknowledged the taboo, even questioned his own motives.
It's like he was aware of the potential for criticism,
Yeah.
yet he went ahead anyway,
Yeah.
like caught between this desire for love and companionship and knowing this relationship would raise eyebrows.
And remember, this is the late 60s, a time of huge social upheaval, but also a time when those traditional values still held a lot of weight.
Yeah, a time of contradictions.
Yeah,
And Tiny Tim himself embodied those contradictions.
absolutely.
He's embraced by the counterculture,
Mhm.
seen as a symbol of, free-spiritedness, unconventionality.
Yet.
He's deeply religious, struggling with his own anxieties about sin, temptation.
And those anxieties, they seem to have intensified as his relationship with Miss Vicky progressed. He writes about it in his journals, his concerns about her youth, her desire for fame, his own fear of temptation.
Almost like he was foreshadowing the challenges ahead.
It does seem that way, yeah.
And the challenges came quickly. I mean, their marriage, it was a media sensation, but also full of difficulties from the start. Their wedding gifts were stolen, intense scrutiny from the press. And then Tiny Tim confesses to Miss Vicky on their wedding night that there would always be other women. Yeah.
He admitted to infidelity before the honeymoon even started.
That's what the sources say.
That's unbelievable. It really speaks to the complexity of their relationship, the conflicting desires, the anxieties that Tiny Tim was dealing with.
The sources also mention some odd details about their intimate life, like his fondness for peanut butter
Yeah.
and his insistence on giving Miss Vicky massages. It seems like his attempts at physical intimacy were often interrupted by bouts of guilt and anxiety, like he was caught between yearning for connection and his fear of sin.
It's a strange and somewhat sad picture, isn't it?
It is.
This man, deeply in love, or at least convinced he is, but unable to fully embrace that love due to his own internal conflicts, and those conflicts, well, they seem to have played a role in the breakdown of their marriage.
They did have a daughter together, though.
Tulip, huh?
He didn't get to name her after a soap product.
You're kidding?
Nope. He wanted to name her Dove or Ivory.
Miss Vicky put her foot down.
Thankfully, yes.
Good for her.
But their marriage lasted only a few years, and it's around this time that Tiny Tim's career starts to falter.
Ah, the classic second album slump.
Something like that.
His second album didn't capture the magic of the debut, and he seemed to be struggling to adapt to the changing musical landscape.
Makes sense. The counterculture movement that embraced him, it was evolving, and his brand of whimsical oddity, well, it didn't resonate the same way anymore.
It's a familiar story. An artist becomes synonymous with a particular moment, and then the world moves on, tastes change. It's tough to stay relevant.
He did try to reinvent himself, though, experimenting with different sounds, collaborations, some, interesting characters.
Like who?
The sources mention a song called Juanita Banana. Apparently it involved a fruit hat. and a lot of nonsensical noises.
Juanita Banana. Not exactly a chart topper, I'm guessing.
You guessed right. And then there's his friendship with Howard Stern, another one who loved pushing boundaries, challenging those societal norms.
Stern and Tiny Tim, huh? That's an interesting combination.
Right.
So Stern would have Tiny Tim on his show, where he'd talk about his conservative views, share anecdotes, perform some of those outlandish songs.
Sounds like a recipe for chaos.
It was a strange pairing, but it did give Tiny Tim a platform, a way to stay in the public eye, even if it was as a caricature of his former self.
But he never gave up on performing, did he? Even as his fame faded, he kept touring, playing smaller venues, embracing the odd and the unexpected.
He lived for the stage. He seemed to find solace in entertaining others, even if it meant, monster truck rallies or low-budget horror films.
It's the story of triumph and tragedy, a man who achieved incredible fame, but also struggled with inner demons and ultimately couldn't escape the shadow of his own persona.
As we kind of get to the final chapter of Tiny Tim's story, it's clear those contradictions we've been talking about, well, they only became more pronounced as he went through those later years of his career.
It's like he was holding on even tighter to his conservative beliefs and, expressing them in ways that alienated some of his fans, even shocked those who still saw him as that whimsical counterculture icon from the 60s.
It's like he was trying to reconcile two versions of himself. The ukulele strumming oddball, who everyone loved, and the deeply religious man, struggling with guilt and anxiety.
And those anxieties, well, they came out in some strange ways, particularly in his music. Oh, yeah.
The sources mention a song, Santa Claus Has Got the AIDS This Year.
Wow. Okay.
Not exactly a holiday classic.
To say the least. It's a jarring title. And it wasn't just that one song.
Right.
He also released She Left Me With the Herpes.
These weren't just attempts at shock value, though, right?
It seems that way.
They reflected a genuine shift in his thinking, a darker perspective that was hard to reconcile with the Tiny Tim people thought they know.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's like he was using his music to process his anxieties about things like the AIDS epidemic, but, doing it in a way that was insensitive, out of touch.
It's a reminder that even those who seem larger than life, they're still grappling with their own fears, insecurities. And sometimes those anxieties, well, they come out in hurtful or offensive ways.
It's maybe a cautionary tale about clinging too tightly to rigid beliefs, especially when those beliefs prevent you from, connecting with others on a human level.
That's a good point. But amidst all this turmoil in Tiny Tim's life, there was one bright spot. His relationship with a woman named Miss Sue.
Miss Sue.
She'd been a fan since childhood. And their connection, well, it became a romance and eventually his third marriage.
Wow, third time's the charm.
Well, in a way, yeah.
So Miss Sue offered him companionship, stability when he really needed it. She was supportive, accepting.
It's heartwarming to know that, even with all the chaos, his declining career, he found someone who truly cared for him.
It really shows the power of human connection, that need for love and acceptance. It goes beyond fame and fortune.
Absolutely. But sadly, even love couldn't shield him from the health problems he'd been facing for years.
Right. The sources mentioned diabetes.
Probably made worse by his lifestyle.
Yeah.
All the touring, performing.
He was warned by doctors to slow down, prioritize his health, but he couldn't resist the stage.
It was his passion.
And in a way, it's fitting that he died doing what he loved, performing for an audience. He was at a ukulele festival in Minneapolis, singing Tiptoe Through the Tulips when he suffered a fatal heart attack. Right there on stage.
It's tragic. But there's a certain poetry to it. He left this world on his own terms, sharing his music, his voice, with people who appreciated him, his artistry, his oddity, his humanity.
Tiny Tim's story reminds us that behind every public persona, every carefully constructed image, there's a complex person with their own dreams, fears, vulnerabilities.
He challenged our ideas of normalcy, embraced the unconventional. And despite his flaws, his contradictions, he left an undeniable mark on pop culture.
He showed us that life is messy, unpredictable, that fame can be both a blessing and a curse, and that true happiness, it lies in finding those who accept you for who you truly are.
Well said. What stands out to you from Tiny Tim's story? What will you take away from this deep dive? Think about it. Maybe even do a little exploring of your own. You never know what fascinating discoveries await. Until next time, keep diving deep.